The vast expanse of the Arcanis galaxy stretched before the viewport of Heliovolt Space Station, a shimmering canvas of stars and cosmic dust. Located precariously close to the edge of the shattered Nebula, a forbidden zone of twisted space-time and ancient dangers, the station stood as humanity's furthest outpost in this corner of the universe. It was the third millennium of the post-Federation era, and tensions between the Nebula Alliance and the ancient fleet had reached a precarious Cold War. Cadet Riven Kyle stood at rigid attention, his Earth-born frame slightly shorter than the other recruits in the line. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hangar deck reflected off the polished emblem on his chest, the lowest rank in the Interstellar Tactical Academy, and a constant reminder of his status. He had graduated last in his class, not for lack of intelligence, but because of the systemic prejudice against pilots from lower-tier worlds. Earth, despite being humanity's cradle, was considered a backwater planet by the galactic military elite. The hangar bay doors parted with a pressurized hiss, revealing the imposing figure that every cadet had been dreading to see. Admiral Varric Thane strode into the room with the confidence of a man who had conquered stars. His silver-streaked hair was cropped short in military precision, and the countless medals adorning his ceremonial uniform clinked softly with each deliberate step. He was a living legend, the hero of the Cygnus conflict, the strategist behind the Helix maneuver, and the most decorated officer in the Alliance's history. He was also, as every Earth-born recruit quickly discovered, utterly contemptuous of anyone not born in the central planets. "Attention!" barked Lieutenant Ayla Dawn, the only other Earth-born officer on the station. Her voice carried the forced authority of someone constantly trying to prove her worth. The line of cadets stiffened even further, if that was physically possible. Admiral Thane walked slowly down the line, his cold gray eyes scanning each recruit with calculating precision. He stopped occasionally to ask questions, testing knowledge, probing for weakness. When he reached Riven, he paused longer than necessary. "Name and origin." "Cadet," he demanded, his voice carrying the refined accent of the Centauri elite. "Cadet Riven Kyle, sir, Earth, North American region," Riven replied, keeping his gaze fixed forward as protocol demanded. Something like amusement flickered across the Admiral's face. "Earth," he repeated, as if the word itself was distasteful. "And they sent you to pilot our most advanced spacecraft? Tell me, Cadet KL, what was your graduating position at the Academy?" Riven swallowed hard. "Last in my class, sir." A ripple of barely suppressed laughter swept through the hangar. The Admiral didn't try to hide his smirk. "Last," he echoed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, it seems the Academy's standards have truly fallen. They're now graduating human waste and sending it to my station." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that somehow still carried across the silent hangar. "You're not a pilot, boy. You're the residue of humanity's arrogance, thinking that just because your species crawled out of the mud first, you deserve a place among the stars." The words cut through Riven like a plasma blade. But he maintained his stance, jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might shatter. This wasn't the first time he'd faced such prejudice, but coming from the legendary Admiral Thane in front of the entire flight wing, it burned deeper than any previous humiliation. "Sir," he managed to reply, his voice steady despite the shame burning his face. The Admiral straightened, seemingly satisfied with the public degradation he had inflicted. "Lieutenant Dawn," he called, turning to Ayla. "Assign Cadet Kyle to maintenance duty. I won't have Earth trash handling my fighters." "Yes, Admiral," Ayla responded, her face a careful mask hiding whatever sympathy she might have felt. Thane continued his inspection, but the damage was done. Every other cadet now knew their place in the hierarchy, above the Earth cadet, at the very least. The inspection was interrupted by the sudden wail of alarms throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the hangar in an ominous glow. "Status report," barked the Admiral. immediately shifting from intimidating inspector to battle-ready commander. A communications officer rushed into the hangar, his face pale. "Sir, we're detecting massive spatial distortions within the shattered nebula. Energy readings are off the charts. Patterns match those recorded during the ancient conflicts." Admiral Thane's expression hardened. "The Ancients?" "Unclear, sir. But Squadron 7 was conducting routine patrol near the nebula's edge. They've gone silent, and their emergency beacons are transmitting from within the nebula itself." A heavy silence fell over the hangar. Squadron 7, the Admiral's elite pilots, the best the Alliance had to offer. And they were trapped inside the most dangerous region of space known to exist. "Prepare rescue operations," the Admiral ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I want our best pilots ready to launch in 15 minutes. "Sir," another officer interrupted, "the nebula's distortion field has intensified. Standard navigational systems won't function. Anyone going in would be flying blind." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "Then we'll send our most experienced pilots with manual override capabilities." The officer hesitated. "Sir, even with manual controls, the spatial distortions are creating gravitational eddies that would tear apart any ship larger than a fighter, and the magnetic storms would disable standard propulsion systems within minutes." "Are you telling me we're going to abandon Squadron 7? The Admiral demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. No one answered. The impossibility of the rescue hung in the air like a physical weight. In the tense silence, Riven stepped forward, breaking formation. "I'll go, sir." All eyes turned to him in shock. Lieutenant Dorn looked horrified. Admiral Thane's expression shifted from surprise to contempt. "You," he scoffed. "The Earth boy who graduated last. This is not the time for suicidal heroics to prove your worth. Cadet!" Riven stood his ground. "With respect, Admiral, I've studied the shattered nebula extensively. It was the subject of my thesis at the Academy." "The thesis that earned you last place?" The Admiral's mockery was cutting. "Yes, sir," Riven acknowledged without flinching. "Because my theories contradicted established doctrine. The nebula's distortion field operates on quantum relativistic principles that our standard navigation can't process. But I've developed an alternative system." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "What system?" "A neural interface navigation method, sir, using direct brainwave patterns to interpret and respond to spatial anomalies faster than any computer could calculate them. That technology is theoretical at best, dangerous at worst." Lieutenant Dorn interjected. "Not theoretical. Lieutenant," Riven replied, "I've built a prototype. It's integrated into one of the older Phantom 5 fighters in the auxiliary hangar." The Admiral's expression darkened. "You modified Alliance military equipment without authorization?" "During my maintenance shifts, sir," Riven admitted. "The Phantom 5 was scheduled for decommissioning. I repurposed it." For a moment, it seemed the Admiral might order Riven's immediate arrest. Instead, he studied the young cadet with calculating eyes. "You understand what you're proposing. Flying into the shattered nebula is considered suicide. Cadet, no one has ever returned." "I understand, sir." The Admiral's laugh was cold and without humor. "Very well. If you're so eager to die, I won't stand in your way. But know this. Your primitive Earth technology and last-place education have no chance against the forces within that nebula." He turned to address the room. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. This is what desperation for recognition looks like." As the Admiral walked away, Lieutenant Dorn approached Riven, keeping her voice low. "Are you insane? That's not courage. That's suicide." Riven met her gaze steadily. "Maybe, but someone has to try." "Why you, after how he treated you?" Riven glanced toward the viewport, where the swirling colors of the shattered nebula pulsed like a malevolent heart against the blackness of space. "Because I can, and because they deserve a chance, regardless of who they are or where they come from." He paused. That's what Earth taught me. At least. Lieutenant Dorn studied him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. I'll help you prepare for launch. But Riven, I hope you know what you're doing. The auxiliary hangar was dimly lit and seldom used, housing outdated equipment and fighters too obsolete for active service. In the far corner, partially covered by a tarp, sat the Phantom 5 fighter that Riven had claimed as his project. He pulled away the covering to reveal a ship that looked nothing like its original design. The sleek lines of the standard Phantom had been augmented with additional sensor arrays. The cockpit was modified with neural interface nodes that would connect directly to the pilot's cerebral cortex. The propulsion system had been completely rebuilt, incorporating elements of Forbidden Earth technology that the Alliance had deemed too unstable for military use. This can't possibly be regulation compliant, Lieutenant Dorn observed, running her hand along the modified hull. It isn't, Riven admitted as he began the pre-flight checks. But regulation ships can't survive in the Nebula. A metallic clanking approached from behind them, and both turned to see the imposing frame of Lieutenant Milo Kor, a robotic officer from the outer colonies. His mechanical eyes focused on the modified ship with what appeared to be disdain. So this is the Earth Trash's suicide mission, Milo stated, his synthesized voice devoid of emotion. Fascinating modification choices. Primitive, but potentially effective. Riven had expected mockery, not analysis. You understand what I've done here. I am a machine. Cadet Kyle, I recognize ingenuity when I see it, regardless of its origin. Malo's metallic head tilted slightly. The neural interface is particularly innovative. Dangerous, but innovative. It's the only way to navigate the quantum distortions, Riven explained, surprised by the robot's interest. Computers can't calculate fast enough, but the human brain can intuitively adapt to spatial anomalies if given the right sensory input. Milo nodded. A theory rejected by the Academy because it places too much value on human intuition rather than machine precision. There was something like respect in his mechanical tone. Perhaps they were wrong. Lieutenant Dorn looked between them. If you're both done with the Technical Admiration Society, we have a rescue mission to prepare for. Riven climbed into the cockpit, feeling the familiar contours of the seat he had spent countless hours modifying. The neural interface crown descended from the ceiling, its delicate probes positioning themselves around his head. The squadron's last known coordinates are being uploaded to your system, Lieutenant Dorn informed him. But once you enter the Nebula, standard communication will be impossible. I've modified the comm system to use quantum entanglement for emergency broadcasts, Riven replied. If I find them, you'll know. Milo stepped forward. The probability of your survival is approximately 12.7%, Cadet Kyle. Riven managed to smile. Higher than I expected. Indeed, most calculations resulted in 0 probability. The robot's eyes flickered. I have adjusted my assessment of your capabilities. Good hunting, Earthborn. As the hangar doors began to open, exposing the blackness of space beyond. Admiral Thane's voice came over the comm system. Cadet KL, this is Admiral Thane. I want it on record that I consider this mission foolhardy and doomed to failure. When you die in that nebula, it will be your own stubbornness to blame. Riven took a deep breath. Understood, sir. I'll try not to disappoint you by surviving. He could almost hear the Admiral's teeth grinding over the comm. Launch when ready, Cadet. And if by some miracle you do find my pilots, bring them home. The Phantom 5 roared to life, its modified engines glowing with an intensity that standard Alliance fighters couldn't match. As Riven guided the ship out of the hangar and into open space, he felt the weight of what lay ahead. The shattered nebula loomed before him, a swirling maelstrom of colors and energy that defied conventional physics. The neural interface activated, sending a jolt of awareness through his consciousness. Suddenly, he wasn't just flying the ship, he was the ship. feeling every micro-variation in the surrounding space as if it were touching his skin. "Phantom 5 to heliovault control," he transmitted. "Beginning approach to Nebula perimeter." "Acknowledged. Phantom 5, came Lieutenant Dawn's voice. "All personnel are monitoring. You are clear to proceed. And Riven, good luck." The fighter accelerated toward the nebula's edge, where reality itself seemed to bend and distort. As he crossed the threshold, the familiar stars behind him disappeared, replaced by a chaotic landscape of light and energy that no human eyes were meant to comprehend. Inside the nebula, physics behaved according to alien rules. Gravitational waves rippled visibly through space like ocean currents. Time itself seemed to stutter and flow at irregular intervals. Through the neural interface, Riven felt these distortions as intuitive sensations: pressure, temperature, resistance, allowing him to navigate by feeling rather than instrumentation. Standard navigation systems immediately failed, screens filling with error messages before shutting down completely. Only the neural interface continued functioning, translating the impossible environment into something his human brain could process and respond to. The first challenge came in the form of a magnetic storm, a writhing mass of energy that would fry any electronic system it touched. Through the interface, Riven perceived it as a wall of heat approaching from his left. He banked sharply right, diving beneath the storm's edge with millimeters to spare. Neural interface functioning beyond expected parameters. He recorded into the ship's log, knowing that standard transmission was impossible this deep in the nebula. "Spatial awareness is different. I can feel the fabric of space-time flexing around the ship." The deeper he penetrated into the nebula, the stranger the phenomena became. Pockets of inverted gravity caused the ship to suddenly accelerate upward. Temporal distortion fields made his perception slow to a crawl, then race forward at dizzying speed. Crystalline structures formed and dissolved in seconds, creating labyrinths of solid matter that appeared from nowhere. Through it all, Riven relied on the neural interface, letting his instincts guide the ship through impossible passages. Hours passed, though time had little meaning in this place. His consciousness began to blur with the ship's systems, the boundary between human and machine growing increasingly indistinct. Then, faintly at first, but growing stronger, he detected a signal, the distorted emergency beacon of Alliance fighters. Squadron 7 was still alive, somewhere deeper in this chaos. He adjusted course, following the signal through a corridor of relatively stable space-time. The signal led him to a pocket of calm within the storm, a bubble where the laws of physics seemed momentarily restored to something approaching normality. Within this pocket, he found them, 7 Alliance fighters, damaged but intact, clustered around a strange crystalline formation that pulsed with its own inner light. And there, in the center of the formation, was Admiral Thane's personal command fighter. Riven activated the quantum entanglement communicator. "Phantom 5 to heliovault control. I've located Squadron 7. All ships appear intact. Requesting instructions." The response, when it came, was heavily distorted but recognizable as Lieutenant Dawn's voice. "Riven, you're alive. The Admiral wants extraction. Immediately. The nebula is destabilizing further." "Understood. Attempting contact with Squadron." He switched to short-range communications, hoping they would function in this pocket of stability. "Squadron 7, this is Cadet Kyle in Phantom 5. I've been sent from Heliovault Station to guide you out." There was a long silence, then a burst of static followed by a familiar, aristocratic voice. "Cadet Kyle, the Earthborn last placer. This must be a hallucination." Despite everything, Riven felt a smile tug at his lips. "No hallucination. Admiral, I'm really here." "Impossible," came the Admiral's voice, stronger now. "No ship could navigate the nebula's distortions." "Mine can. Sir, I've developed a neural interface navigation system that—" "Your unauthorized modifications," the Admiral interrupted. "I remember. It seems I may have underestimated their effectiveness. We can discuss it later, sir. Right now, we need to get your squadron out of here. The Nebula is becoming increasingly unstable. We can't leave, the Admiral replied, his voice strangely flat. We have discovered something magnificent. The crystalline entity you see before you, it's alive. Cadet, alive and ancient beyond comprehension. Riven studied the pulsing crystal formation. Through the neural interface, he sensed something wrong, an artificial pattern beneath the natural chaos, a structured intelligence that felt distinctly malevolent. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from that formation. I don't believe it's safe to remain here. Safe? The Admiral laughed, a sound entirely devoid of humor. Safety is irrelevant in the face of such discovery. This entity contains knowledge from before humanity's existence. It has shown me wonders. The hairs on the back of Riven's neck stood up. The Admiral's voice was wrong, too monotone, too detached, and now that he looked more closely at the squadron's fighters, he noticed tendrils of crystalline material extending from the formation, connecting to each ship like parasitic vines. Admiral Thane, sir, I believe you and your squadron may be under some form of external influence. Request permission to approach and assist with evacuation. Stay where you are. Cadet. The Admiral's voice suddenly sharpened. That's an order. We require no evacuation. The entity is not a threat. It is our salvation. The key to ending the Cold War, to establishing humanity's dominance over the galaxy. Through the neural interface, Riven sensed a pulse of energy emanating from the crystal formation, reaching out toward his ship like probing fingers. He maneuvered away instinctively. Heliovolt control, he transmitted over the quantum communicator. Be advised, Squadron 7 appears to be under the influence of an unknown entity. Request immediate guidance. Lieutenant Dorn's response was clearer this time. Riven, we're picking up massive energy surges from your location. Whatever that thing is, our scientists say it matches patterns from ancient weapon systems. You need to get out of there, with or without the squadron. I can't leave them, Riven replied, studying the crystal entity. Through the neural interface, he was beginning to perceive patterns in its energy fluctuations, almost like a language. There must be a way to disrupt its control. The Admiral's fighter suddenly powered up its weapon systems, targeting locks appearing on Riven's display. This is your final warning. Cadet, leave now, or be destroyed. Riven's mind raced. The neural interface was giving him unprecedented insight into the nebula's structure, including the energy patterns of the crystal entity. It wasn't just controlling the Admiral and his squadron, it was feeding off them, using their ship's power systems and their own neural energy to sustain itself. It's a V-Trax, he realized aloud. An ancient artificial intelligence weapon system designed to hijack enemy ships and turn them against their own forces. His academy research on forbidden technologies came flooding back. The V-Trax were banned after the Third Federation War because they couldn't distinguish between friend and foe once activated. The Admiral's fighter fired a warning shot that passed just above Riven's ship. There will be no more warnings. Earth trash. Leave us to our ascension. Riven knew he had seconds to make a decision. The neural interface was showing him the crystalline entity's structure in perfect detail, including its central core, the processing hub of the ancient AI. If he could disrupt that core, he might be able to break its control over the squadron. But reaching the core meant flying directly through the Admiral's defensive perimeter. Admiral Thane, he transmitted. If you can hear me in there, I'm going to get you out. All of you. I promise. He activated the Phantom's full combat systems for the first time. Systems he had enhanced far beyond Alliance specifications. The neural interface shifted to combat mode, expanding his awareness to include targeting, weapon energy levels, and defensive capabilities. The Admiral's fighter immediately opened fire, joined by two others from the squadron. Energy beams sliced through the space where Riven had been a moment before, But the neural interface had allowed him to sense the attack before it came, moving the Phantom out of harm's way with preternatural precision. He didn't return fire. These weren't enemies. They were fellow Alliance pilots under alien control. Instead, he dove and wove through the barrage, pushing the Phantom to its structural limits as he worked his way closer to the crystal entity. Neural combat systems functioning at 97% efficiency, he recorded. Enhanced reaction time allowing for predictive evasion, approaching primary target. As he neared the crystal formation, its defenses intensified. Not just the controlled Alliance fighters, but the entity itself began to attack, firing bolts of pure energy that warped the space-time around them. Through the neural interface, Riven felt these distortions before they formed, navigating the impossible geometry with intuitive understanding. He was close now, close enough to see the pulsing core at the center of the crystalline mass, close enough to end this. But 3 Alliance fighters formed a barrier between him and the target, weapons locked and ready. In the center was Admiral Thane's command fighter. "Final warning. Earth filth," came the Admiral's voice, now so distorted it barely sounded human. "Leave or be destroyed with the rest of your primitive species." Riven made his decision. "Computer, activate Vocal Synthesis Program Alpha." "Vocal Synthesis active," responded the ship's AI. "Target, Admiral Varric Thane's speech patterns." Synthesize the following message in his voice. "All units, target the crystal core. Fire all weapons. Authorization, Thane 7 Alpha 0. The computer processed for a moment, then broadcast the message, a perfect replica of the Admiral's aristocratic command tone, complete with the proper authorization codes. The effect was immediate. The squadron's fighters, programmed to respond to their commander's voice commands even when their pilots were incapacitated, suddenly shifted their targeting from Riven to the crystal entity's core, their weapons powered up, ready to fire. The entity, sensing the betrayal, lashed out in confusion. The tendrils connecting it to the ships began to pulse frantically, trying to reassert control. The Admiral's voice came through again, but this time it was clearly not human at all, a synthesized screech of rage and fear. "What are you doing? Stop! I am Vatrex, awakened after millennia. I am your ascension. I am your—" The squadron fired as one, their combined weapons striking the crystal core with devastating precision. The entity's structure began to fracture, releasing bursts of energy that distorted the surrounding space-time even further. Through the neural interface, Riven sensed what was coming next. "All units, pull back. The core is destabilizing." He pushed his ship forward, using the confusion to slip past the defensive line. The Admiral's fighter, momentarily free from the entity's direct control as it fought to survive, drifted aimlessly. Riven positioned his Phantom directly between the crystal entity and the squadron. Through the neural interface, he felt the imminent collapse of the entity's containment field, a catastrophic release of energy that would destroy everything in this pocket of the nebula. There was only one chance. The Phantom's modified hull contained experimental shield technology that might, just might, be able to absorb and redirect enough of the blast to create an escape corridor for the squadron. "Phantom 5 to all Alliance fighters," he transmitted. "Prepare for emergency extraction on my mark. When I say go, full power to engines and follow the exact course I'm transmitting now." He sent the navigational data, a precise path through the nebula's distortions that would lead them back to Heliovolt Station, a path only he could calculate. With his neural understanding of the chaotic space, the crystal entity's core was now a blinding point of light, reality itself bending around it as it approached critical failure. Riven positioned his ship optimally, diverting all power to the experimental shields. "Go! Go now!" he shouted as the core began to implode. The Admiral's fighter was the first to move, engines flaring as it accelerated along the designated escape vector. The rest of the squadron followed, forming a tight formation as they fled the imminent destruction. Riven held his position, the Phantom's shields absorbing the initial waves of energy from the collapsing entity. The neural interface translated the strain into physical sensation, pain that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. But he maintained focus, using the ship's modified systems to create a stable corridor through which the squadron could escape. The entity's final collapse was approaching. Riven knew the Phantom couldn't survive it, not this close to the epicenter. But if he pulled away too soon, the squadron would be caught in the blast wave. "Heliovolt control," he transmitted. "Squadron 7 is en route to you. Confirm their approach vector is clear." Lieutenant Dorn's voice came through, tense with concern. "Vector confirmed clear. Riven. But what about you? The energy readings we're getting, you can't survive that close to the collapse." He watched as the last of the squadron's fighters disappeared into the nebula's chaos, following his calculated path to safety. Only then did he allow himself to acknowledge the truth. "The Phantom's core systems are overloading," he reported calmly. "Experimental shields failing. I'll try to follow behind the squadron, but tell them I kept my promise." The neural interface was beginning to break down, the sensations becoming fragmented and distorted. Riven felt his consciousness separating from the ship as systems failed one by one. With the last of the Phantom's power, he activated the emergency thrusters, pushing away from the collapsing entity just as its core reached critical mass. The explosion that followed tore through the fabric of space-time itself, creating a shockwave that rippled outward through the nebula. The Phantom, already damaged beyond repair, caught the edge of the blast. Through the fragmenting neural interface, Riven felt the ship disintegrating around him. Hull breaches, system failures, structural collapse, all translated into overwhelming sensory input that his brain could barely process. His last conscious thought, as darkness claimed him, was a simple observation. Earth trash, not so useless after all. The blast wave from the entity's destruction propagated through the shattered nebula, disrupting the chaotic energy patterns that had made it impenetrable for centuries. Across the nebula, the distortion fields weakened, spatial anomalies collapsed, and the laws of physics reasserted themselves. On Heliovolt Station, sensors recorded the unprecedented event with a mixture of scientific wonder and tactical concern. "What's happening?" demanded Admiral Thane, who had been rushed to medical upon the squadron's return. He was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. But the unnatural influence of the Vetrax entity had been purged from his system. Lieutenant Dorn studied the sensor readings with wide eyes. "The nebula. It's stabilizing, sir. The quantum distortions are collapsing back into normal space-time. It's as if whatever was maintaining the anomalous conditions has been neutralized." "Cadet Kale," the Admiral murmured. "Did he make it out?" Lieutenant Dorn couldn't meet his gaze. "We detected a massive energy surge at his last known position, followed by the structural failure of the Phantom 5. No emergency beacon has been detected." The Admiral's expression remained unreadable. "Keep scanning, and prepare a full report on the effects of the nebula's collapse. If it's truly stabilizing, it could change the strategic balance in this sector." "Yes, sir," Lieutenant Dorn replied, hesitating before adding, "And Cadet Kale, sir, should we list him as killed in action?" Admiral Thane stared at the display showing the nebula's transformation. "No," he said finally. "List him as missing in action, until we have confirmation, one way or the other." Days passed. The shattered nebula continued its transformation, areas that had been impenetrable for centuries becoming navigable. Alliance scout ships cautiously mapped the new configurations, discovering regions of space untouched since the ancient wars. Squadron 7's pilots recovered slowly from their ordeal. Medical scans showed neural patterns consistent with invasive consciousness manipulation. The Vetrax entity had been literally rewiring their brains to serve its purposes. Of them all, Admiral Thane had been the most deeply affected, perhaps because he had been the entity's primary focus. He spoke little of what had happened in the nebula. filing the minimum required reports and deflecting questions with cold efficiency. But those who knew him best noticed subtle changes, moments of pensive silence, uncharacteristic hesitation when giving orders, and most surprisingly, an absence of his usual contempt when dealing with officers from lower-tier worlds. 1 week after the incident, as Heliovolt Station had begun to return to normal operations, the perimeter sensors detected an anomaly emerging from the former heart of the shattered nebula. "Unidentified object approaching station," reported the duty officer. "Small craft, heavily damaged. No readable identification transponder." Admiral Thane, who had been reviewing tactical reports in the command center, looked up sharply. "Visual confirmation?" The main screen activated, showing a distant speck growing larger as it approached. As the image enhanced, gasps echoed around the command center. What remained of the Phantom 5 fighter drifted toward them, a shattered hull, exposed framework, systems that should have failed hours ago somehow still functioning at minimal capacity. "Life signs?" the Admiral demanded. The sensor operator shook his head in disbelief. "One life sign, sir. Weak but stable. It's impossible. That ship shouldn't be able to maintain life support in that condition. Nothing about that ship has ever conformed to expectations." Admiral Thane replied quietly. "Dispatch recovery teams immediately. Priority 1 medical response." Lieutenant Dorn was already moving. "I'll lead the team myself, sir." The Admiral nodded once, then returned his attention to the screen, watching as the impossible survivor limped home. The recovery was delicate. What remained of the Phantom 5 was so structurally compromised that standard docking procedures were impossible. Instead, emergency teams had to perform a zero-G extraction, carefully cutting through the twisted hull to reach the cockpit. What they found inside defied explanation. Cadet Riven Kyle was alive. Barely. The neural interface crown had fused with his skull during the explosion, creating a direct, permanent connection between his brain and what remained of the ship's systems. Medical scanners showed that his neural patterns had merged with the ship's AI, creating a hybrid consciousness that had somehow maintained minimal life support and navigational capability. He was unconscious, trapped in a state between human awareness and machine processing. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize him before attempting to disconnect the interface, a procedure no one had ever performed before, with risks no one could fully calculate. Admiral Thane stood in the observation room above the medical bay, watching the procedure with an unreadable expression. Lieutenant Dorn joined him, her face drawn with concern. "The doctors say it's unprecedented," she reported. "The neural fusion is so complete they're not sure where his consciousness ends and the ship's systems begin. They're attempting to isolate his core neural patterns before disconnection." The Admiral nodded silently, his gaze never leaving the still form on the operating table below. "Sir," Lieutenant Dorn ventured, "about what happened in the Nebula." "What about it, Lieutenant?" His voice was flat, discouraging further discussion. She pressed on anyway. "The V-Trax entity. It was using us, using you, to reactivate itself, to escape the Nebula and spread throughout Alliance space. I'm aware of what it was doing. Lieutenant, I was there." "Yes, sir, but what I'm trying to say is, if Cadet Kyle hadn't come for us, hadn't found a way to break its control..." She left the implication hanging. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "The cadets are calling it the Nebula shattering," he said finally. "Did you know that? They say he didn't just rescue us. He broke open a region of space that's been closed to humanity for centuries." A humorless smile touched his lips, all with an obsolete fighter and Earth trash technology. Before Lieutenant Dorn could respond, alarms blared from the medical bay. On the table, Riven's body convulsed as doctors scrambled to stabilize him. The neural interface crown sparked and flared, systems overloading as they attempted the final disconnection. For a terrifying moment, it seemed they would lose him. Then, with a final surge of energy that temporarily darkened the medical bay's systems, the interface detached. Riven's body went limp, vital signs plummeting before slowly, stubbornly, stabilizing again. The lead physician looked up at the observation window and nodded once. Successful disconnection. Whether his mind had survived intact remained to be seen. 3 days later, Riven Kyle opened his eyes. The medical bay was quiet, dimmed to accommodate his sensitivity to light. For several minutes, he simply stared at the ceiling, reorienting himself to a consciousness confined to a single body after experiencing the expanded awareness of the neural interface. "How does it feel?" came a voice from beside his bed. "Being just human again?" Riven turned his head slowly, still adjusting to the limitations of physical movement. Admiral Thane sat in a chair nearby, his uniform impeccable as always, but his face showing signs of strain the cadet had never seen before. "Smaller," Riven answered honestly, his voice rough from disuse. "Quieter." The Admiral nodded as if he understood. Perhaps, after his experience with the Vatrax entity, he did. The doctors say there may be lingering effects. The neural fusion was unprecedented. They've never seen such complete integration between human and machine consciousness. Riven tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "The squadron? Did they all make it back?" "Every pilot recovered safely," the Admiral confirmed. "Thanks to your intervention. And the Nebula? Changed, stabilized in ways our scientists are still trying to understand. The distortion fields have collapsed across 78% of its volume." The Admiral leaned forward slightly. "You did more than rescue my squadron, Cadet. You've opened up a region of space that's been inaccessible for centuries." Riven absorbed this information silently. His memories of the final moments in the Nebula were fragmented, flashes of sensation, data, and pure instinct all blurred together. "The Vatrax entity," he said finally. "It was ancient, designed as a weapon during the early Federation wars. It was supposed to be deactivated, but somehow survived in the Nebula's distortion fields." The Admiral's expression darkened. "Yes, we've since discovered references to it in classified historical archives. A forbidden artificial intelligence weapon, created to infiltrate enemy command systems and turn them against their own forces." He paused. "Created, as it happens, by my ancestors during the Third Federation War." Riven looked at him in surprise. "The Thane family has a long military history." The Admiral continued, his voice carefully controlled. "Not all of it honorable. As it turns out, the Vatrax program was their creation, and their disgrace when it proved uncontrollable. It recognized you." Riven realized. That's why it focused on your ship first. It sensed a genetic connection to its creators. "So it would seem." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "A family legacy I knew nothing about, conveniently erased from official records. My illustrious ancestors, it seems, were responsible for one of the most dangerous weapons ever developed, one that nearly reactivated using me as its vessel." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. "I've reviewed the technical specifications of your modified Phantom 5, the Admiral said eventually. "Particularly the neural interface system. It's remarkable work. Far beyond what should have been possible with the resources available to you." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet, Cadet." The Admiral's expression was unreadable. "What you did, modifying Alliance military equipment without authorization, implementing experimental technology, using forbidden Earth systems, these are serious violations of at least 17 different regulations." Riven met his gaze steadily. "I understand, sir. Under normal circumstances, such violations would result in immediate court-martial and dishonorable discharge." The Admiral stood, clasping his hands behind his back as he paced beside the bed. "However, These are not normal circumstances. Your actions, while grossly insubordinate, did save the lives of 7 Alliance pilots and fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of this sector. He stopped pacing and turned to face Riven directly. The official report will state that the Phantom 5 fighter, while an outdated model, performed adequately in the emergency situation, with the notable exception that its systems would have failed completely if not for the exceptional skill of its pilot. Riven blinked in surprise. "Sir, that's all the record will show. Cadet Kyle, the neural interface, the modified systems, the forbidden technology, none of it will appear in official documentation." The Admiral's eyes were hard. "Is that understood?" Riven understood perfectly. The Admiral was protecting himself as much as Riven. Admitting the full extent of what had happened would mean acknowledging how close the Vetrax had come to using him as a weapon against the Alliance. It would mean exposing his family's buried history. And perhaps most uncomfortably for a man of his position, it would mean acknowledging that an Earth-born cadet's primitive technology had succeeded where Alliance standard systems had failed. "Understood, sir," Riven replied quietly. The Admiral nodded once. "Good. Now, as to your future in the Alliance..." Riven held up a hand, surprising himself with his boldness. "If I may, Admiral, I've made a decision about that." The Admiral raised an eyebrow but gestured for him to continue. "I'm requesting honorable discharge," Riven said. "My experience in the Nebula has changed my perspective, and the doctors tell me the neural fusion has left permanent alterations to my brain structure. I'm not sure I'm fit for standard service anymore." For a moment, the Admiral looked genuinely taken aback. "You're voluntarily leaving the Alliance? After what you accomplished?" "I think I can be of more use elsewhere," Riven replied. "The neural interface technology has potential beyond military applications. If it can be refined, made safer." "You'd continue that research, despite the risks?" Riven nodded. "On Earth, where such innovation is encouraged rather than regulated out of existence." The Admiral was silent for a long moment, studying Riven with an intensity that would have intimidated him only weeks before. Finally, he gave a single, sharp nod. "Very well. I'll process the discharge papers myself." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One last thing. Cadet Kyle, the media has been persistent in their requests for interviews about the Nebula shattering incident. They're particularly interested in the pilot who made it possible." Riven grimaced. "I'd rather avoid that attention, sir." The Admiral's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "As would I. Nevertheless, they're demanding a statement. I've prepared something suitable for release." "May I ask what it says, sir?" The Admiral reached into his pocket and withdrew a data pad, which he placed on the bedside table. "See for yourself. Good day, Cadet Kyle, and good luck with your research." After the Admiral had gone, Riven picked up the pad and activated it. The official statement was brief. Just a single sentence attributed to Admiral Varric Thane, hero of the Cygnus conflict and most decorated officer in the Alliance. Phantom 5 fighters are generally unreliable, except, it seems, in the hands of Earth-born pilots. 6 months later, on a clear autumn day in the North American region of Earth, a small research facility opened its doors on the outskirts of what had once been Colorado. Its name, emblazoned on a simple sign above the entrance, raised eyebrows among the Alliance military observers sent to monitor its activities. Nebula Shatter Research Center. Inside, a team of young scientists and engineers, many of them washouts or rejects from the Alliance's prestigious academies, worked on refining a revolutionary neural interface system under the direction of a quiet, intense young man with peculiar scars around his temples. Reports of the center's activities made their way back to Heliovolt Station, now the command center for Alliance exploration of the newly accessible regions of the former Shattered Nebula. Admiral Thane reviewed these reports personally, occasionally making notes, but taking no direct action to interfere with the research. On the anniversary of the incident, as Heliovolt Station held a formal ceremony commemorating the successful military operation that opened new frontiers for Alliance expansion. A reporter from the Galactic Press approached the Admiral with a question that had been circulating throughout the fleet. "Admiral Thane," she began, recording device hovering nearby. "There are rumors that the Nebula shattering was not, in fact, a planned military operation, but rather an unauthorized rescue mission conducted by a single pilot using experimental technology. Would you care to comment on these allegations?" The Admiral regarded her coolly. "The official record of events is clear, and I have nothing to add to it." "But, sir," the reporter persisted, "sources close to Heliovolt Station claim that an Earth-born cadet named Riven Kael, who has since left the Alliance, was responsible for both the rescue and the Nebula's transformation. Some even suggest that your own squadron was in danger, and that Cadet Kael—" "Enough," the Admiral interrupted, his voice sharp. As the gathered dignitaries turned to observe the exchange, he seemed to reconsider his tone. More calmly, he continued, "The achievements of individual pilots, while commendable, are secondary to the collective accomplishments of the Alliance military. I would caution against sensationalizing what was, ultimately, a successful operation that has benefited all of humanity." The reporter wasn't deterred. "But wouldn't you agree, Admiral, that recognizing individual excellence, regardless of its planetary origin, is essential to fostering the meritocratic principles the Alliance claims to uphold?" For a moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across the Admiral's carefully composed features. Those who knew him best might have identified it as reluctant respect. "What I will say," he replied finally, choosing his words with precision, "is that the incident in question has prompted a re-evaluation of certain Alliance policies and perspectives. The universe is vast and unpredictable. To dismiss any source of innovation or courage based on preconceived notions of superiority would be unwise." The reporter leaned forward eagerly. "Are you referring to the Alliance's historical bias against Earth-developed technologies and Earth-born personnel?" The Admiral's expression closed off again. "I'm referring to the importance of maintaining an open mind in the face of new evidence. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a ceremony to attend." As he walked away, the reporter called after him, "One last question. Admiral, have you had any contact with Riven Kael since his discharge?" The Admiral paused but didn't turn around. "No," he said simply, "but I understand his research is progressing well. Earth has always had a talent for unconventional solutions." With that, he continued toward the ceremony, leaving the reporter to ponder the significance of what might have been the first compliment to Earth ever recorded from the legendary Admiral. Back on Earth, unaware of the exchange, Riven Kael stood on the roof of his research facility, gazing up at the night sky. The neural modifications left by his experience in the Nebula allowed him to perceive the stars differently than most humans, seeing patterns of energy and potential that others couldn't comprehend. Lieutenant Ayla Dawn, who had resigned her commission to join his research team, stepped out onto the roof to join him. "The new interface prototype is ready for testing," she informed him. "Milo's modifications have increased stability by 47%. Riven nodded, still looking upward. The robotic lieutenant had been another surprise defector from the Alliance, claiming that his machine logic had calculated better odds of meaningful technological advancement outside the restrictive military structure. "Do you ever regret it?" Ayla asked, following his gaze to the stars. "Leaving? You could have been a hero in the Alliance after what you did." Riven considered the question. "No," he said finally. "What happened in the Nebula? It showed me something bigger than military ranks and planetary politics. When our minds connect directly to the universe around us, those distinctions become meaningless." "Pretty philosophical for someone who was just trying to rescue the guy who called him Earth trash," Ayla observed with a wry smile. Riven laughed softly. Maybe near-death experiences in reality-warping nebulae tend to have that effect. Speaking of the charming Admiral, Ayla said, did you see the interview? The one where he almost, sort of, in his extremely roundabout way, admitted that Earth technology might not be completely worthless. I saw it, Riven confirmed. For Varric Thane, that's practically a love letter to our planet. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. The first civilian neural interface ships will be ready for production next year, Ayla said eventually. The Alliance is already making noise about regulation and oversight. Let them, Riven replied with unexpected firmness. This technology doesn't belong to the military or to any single planet. It belongs to everyone who wants to truly experience the universe as it is, not just as our limited senses perceive it. Ayla studied his profile in the starlight. You really did shatter more than just a nebula, didn't you? Riven smiled, thinking of the lonely cadet who had once stood at attention before a contemptuous admiral, desperate to prove his worth. That person seemed as distant now as the stars above, transformed by his journey through chaos into something neither fully human nor machine, but something new and unclassifiable. I just did what anyone would do, he said simply. I saw people in trouble, and I helped them. The fact that one of them had publicly humiliated me was irrelevant. That's what the Admiral never understood about Earth. Ayla replied. We don't help people because they deserve it. We help them because they need it. From the laboratory below came the sound of Milo's mechanical voice, calling them to witness the test of their latest prototype. As they turned to go inside, Riven cast one last glance at the stars, at the distant region where the shattered nebula had once blocked humanity's path, now open and beckoning. The universe had changed. He had changed. And somewhere out there, perhaps even the proud Admiral Thane had changed a little too. Not a bad outcome, Riven thought. For a piece of Earth trash,